right, hello everyone. My name's Theresa here from Vectr Solutions, and today I've got the full crew with me. Kate Visconti from Five to Flow is back, and I'm also joined by two of my Vectr colleagues, Kenny Wright and Cal Stock. Kate, Kenny, Cal, good to have you guys here today.
Happy to be back. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
All right, today we're talking about a phrase everyone in state and local government has heard 1,000 times. Do more with less. Kate, you actually have a line about this that I want you to open up with because it's the whole reason that we picked this topic.
Yeah, I think I actually said I feel like the world's moving toward do more with less until you have to do everything with nothing. It's definitely something I've seen. And as we are diving, especially into the world of AI and things like that, it's constantly moving to do more with less. And people have been asked to try to just make things out of nothing. We have budget shrinking, we have staff coming and going, we've got layoffs, and the number of people that we need to get these awesome jobs done and things that we're working on. I feel some of the stuff you're about to talk about with license renewals, grant reviews, some of your public sector clients that you work with, city, state, local, federal, all these things that are happening don't shrink, just the staff to do them is shrinking.
Yeah, and I think in most industries, we're starting to hear more about cutting staff with the rise in AI and shrinking budgets. But in state and local, and to some extent education, really that's just normal operating procedures, or you could just say it's Tuesday.
Yeah, it's
So
been
that's
Tuesday for a long time, by the way.
Yes,
So,
yes, it has. So that's what we're unpacking here today, how the pressure to do more with less actually shows up in day to day for these agencies. And so Cal is going to ground some of that experience in a real engagement that we've partnered with a state agency on. And Kenny's here to talk again about the technology that we've used to build to really solve this problem. And then Kate, of course, is going to be here to help us understand how to drive organizational change within your agency and being able to do more with less with the Five to Flow core elements. So let's dig in and talk about what we're actually seeing across these engagements right now. We've already talked about budget cuts, staff reductions, but the reality is that constituent demand is not declining. If anything, we're seeing more and more license applications increasing, more grant program expansion, and the volume around inspections is really not shrinking just because the department shrank.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost the converse of more pressure in these smaller agencies, especially like having the small but mighty team, but are we helping them stay mighty? I guess is the way I'd put it.
Exactly. And so we see commissions, license boards, parks and rec, all of these different agencies are facing enormous mandates, regulations with almost no dedicated IT support. And there's no one down the hall that can just help them build the system. So there's barely anyone who can even fix the printer.
Yeah, and what that looks like in real SLED terms today is where day-to-day volunteer sign-up sheets are a spreadsheet that nobody is updating in real time. It's an approval that is three email chains strung together that takes 2 weeks to even get the maybe, or an inspection that's done over the phone where the details are written truly on a sticky note that may or may not end up there at the end of the day.
Yeah, so one of our really engaging projects was with Keeping Arkansas Beautiful Commission. And I think that was a really clear example of what Cal's talking about. Cal, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Keep Arkansas Beautiful, this like small state agency under the Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. When we got there, everything was manual, right? Just in
Mhm.
the way we've seen for so many other agencies. So for their volunteer signups, they were coming in through a job form submission that was sorted by hand. So inventory was tracked in spreadsheets, event approvals moved at the speed of whoever happened to check their email that day.
And what changed as part of the engagement that we did?
Yeah, our engagement was really targeting bringing that volunteer data together and centralizing it so that we could automate some of those workflows, connect those job forms directly into their operations instead of leaving it just like an inbox that's getting more and more full by the day. So, though the result wasn't really flashy, it was that we were giving time back to the staff that they could focus on the work that really mattered. They could spend less time chasing down those forms and more time actually running the program that they were hired to run.
I love that, Cal. And meanwhile, I'm like doing those emojis where you've got the one little emoji. Oh gosh. But what strikes me about as you're talking about this, and Theresa, you referenced the five core elements, is it's almost never just about the technology. It's very much around the people that we're working with within the agencies, those manual processes, and the tool is rarely the primary failure. It's truly understanding how to take the people and those processes along the way. And when I hear manual process and it's 2026, I'm just like, yeah, back to the emoji. I don't think that I've seen enough people examine those future state processes before deploying something. And that's what I love about working with you guys at Vectr, even on a project we're working on together, is that you're truly understanding that business process and getting the team to abandon that spreadsheet mindfully. I can't even believe we're still working in spreadsheets in this day and age.
Thanks for sharing our secret sauce, Kate. But tell us more about what is the cost when you skip the process as part of these sort of technology projects?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I've used a visual of this where I put a rotary dialer on my cell phone and I've got this state-of-the-art piece of equipment, but I'm doing an old school thing. And so when you have that problem with the paper processes, instead of replacing them, there's always, and we'll talk about this in future sessions on change management, but the four quadrants, and one of them is the comfort zone. And if you don't take away the side tools or shadow tools, I'll call them, off to the side, you're just ending up with a digital roommate, as we might call it, sitting next to this tool, and you're going to have incomplete data within the system because people are still using these other tools.
Yeah, there's often this thing that takes place across these implementations where we see how all of this movement to make improvements or make change has just led to this Frankenstein system where people don't even realize that what they're doing today is actually comprised of manual workarounds where processes had failed them previously. So when you come in and get that current state, folks don't even realize it's a problem. They just say, this is how we've done it, this is how we've been doing it. And that's usually when we know we're in the right room talking to the right people.
Great takeaway. Kate, let's talk a little bit more about the five core elements and how you think that is relevant to doing more with less, especially in these state and local agencies.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you. The five core elements, I'll just rattle them off quickly: people, culture, process, tech, and analytics. And it's mindful that we do start with people. What I've found across agencies and just in any workforce is, especially if they're mission driven, that people are in a state of cognitive overload. A lot of mission driven organizations with low budget to pay enough people sometimes have cobbled together too many different systems, too many manual tasks, too little support. What that drives in a lot of organizations as we downsize or teams reorg, the number one thing we're finding in our diagnostics is that people don't know their role super clearly. And as you can imagine, when you deploy new technology, if that removes steps, or design a new process and remove steps, the people just don't know what to do and where and how. And we're bringing in this concept with flow state called attention residue. So your morning starting with triaging from the spreadsheet or this jot form inbox you mentioned, Cal, a voicemail queue. You're never really clear exactly what you should be working on. And I think I've joked with all of you, none of us went to university to answer Slack or Teams pings or read emails. And our job description is to actually do something strategic and mindful. So that's starting with people.
And in terms of the five core elements, can you talk a little bit more? Are the five core elements based in research, or are these through your observations over your professional career?
I think I get to say both. So we have researched, probably, we've got a suite of around 10 to 15 scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, productivity experts that have come into this, but also just, from working with me over 10 years ago, that we've been doing this for so long that we've got a lot of original research. But the stat that stops everybody in their tracks is that only about a quarter of workers are able to manage, probably not even a quarter of workers. It's basically, we're only paying attention around 50 to 60% of the time, only doing work around that much time. And so people aren't able to get into a state of peak performance, also known as flow state, which we'll talk about on another call at some point. But 3 out of 4 people are just really stuck in this productivity purgatory. And when we tell people we're going to help you be more productive, the immediate brain alert that puts you into cognitive overload is they're going to try to make you do even more now with less to keep to the theme. So we're constantly busy. We're always in a rush and we're chronically distracted. So we're never actually in the zone. I think we've talked about how to be in the zone. So for an agency who has a growing backlog, fewer staff, how is that stuff prioritized? How do you actually get to focus on it? You guys are in this space yourselves, that if you're working on a project and you really need to hunker down on quality and you're trying to deliver to a mission, you're just going to create a crisis situation.
So it's like, don't think about the elephant, makes you think about the elephant. Get into flow state, makes you not get into flow state. So
Yeah.
it's like trying to sleep and you just can't. Just never reaching that point that you need to reach to be
Yeah.
effective.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue, Kenny, into culture, because so the second of the 5 core elements is culture. And Theresa, also weaving in your question on research, there's tons of research on culture work, and people say culture eats strategy for breakfast. So depending on how these agencies, Cal, you referenced, this is how we've always done it, culture, versus you guys get to come in and ask some really tough questions or do the 5 whys and try to get people from being stubborn and stuck in their ways or just complacent and their kind of survival mechanism of, I already know how to do what I'm doing now. And even though it's really not efficient or the best way to do it right now, people can be resistant to changing. So the other component is, I'm sure you've been through this, and I'm with a client right now that said it's their 10th time to try to do this particular project. So as you see systems come and go within your organization, you get this is the flavor of the month. You've been asked to adopt this tool, it fails. So now we're going to move to the next one. And so that skepticism within the culture, you could be bringing in the best new processes and technologies, but if the people in culture aren't really believing that this is going to change, that it's built with and for them in mind, and acknowledging that openly, you're just going to continue to hit that resistance. And that's step 1, is figuring out where we're going to see that.
The next element of the 5 core elements is process, which I definitely can speak a little bit to based on my change management background and the work that we do here with Vectr, because this is an area where I think we see a lot of the implementation investment go to waste. Because really what we end up doing in some cases is we see customers or agencies deploy Salesforce on top of broken processes, similar to what Cal was talking about, is what was a workaround just became the standard operating procedure. And so the process doesn't really get examined, it just gets digitized. And so if you're thinking about approval workflows or any other workflows that require coordination, where you're not examining process to rethink the way that you've been doing things, a 3-week paper approval just becomes a 3-week digital approval. So you've made investments to make the same slow thing look like it's modern. And I think that's why that process core element is critical to the way that Vectr, our methodology, is to be able to make sure that we're taking a look at the process and helping our customers and agencies think about new ways of doing things.
Yeah, so it's basically building that really goofy chair that nobody sits in and no one really wants to sit in, and they just go back to what they've been doing, basically, right?
Penny's always good at those metaphors. That's right. And that's where I think there's another element to this where we call the secret deployment. So leadership rolls out a new system, doesn't really tell anyone about it, announces it on go live day. And we see this a lot in the GovCloud space too. Great, it's deployed, it's there, we're live, we're compliant. But that's the equivalent of your spouse reorganizing the whole kitchen while you're on vacation and then expecting you to make your coffee as normal on Monday morning.
Yeah, don't mess with my coffee, by the way. Total chaos, resistance, people quietly hunting, the learning curve that you create. And I was just having this chat about change management with my brother in that top down versus bottom up, and what is true change management is actually like bringing the people along the way to help design it instead of just, we made this decision unilaterally, now go do it.
Yeah, I think the most common thing I hear from some of the agencies that we work with after go live, where especially the process and change management wasn't part of it, is oh, nobody told us this was happening, or not that this doesn't work, it's just they didn't know. So then they're catching up in terms of process, training, and enablement just to be able to get the adoption that they're looking for.
Awesome. So to switch gears a little bit to my topic of choice, on the technology side, our approach is really to take Salesforce's kind of prepackaged or modular solutions that are built specifically for SLED workflows. So we're not starting from the bottom and building up from there. We're actually starting from a very good foundation and a baseline, and then configuring to fit the agency. And again, it's designed for agencies or offices that really don't have a dedicated IT department to lean on, or they do have a department to lean on that is just overburdened with across state or all of the work they have to do that they're already stretched thin on. The modules that are prepackaged cover things like volunteer management, event coordination, licensing, permitting, case and complaint management, grants administration, and pretty much anything that has to do with individuals from the general public coming in to put in requests to their local government. The point is that tool selection gets driven by what the agency actually needs to do, like what their outputs are, not by what looks exciting from a demoing perspective.
Yeah, and the last element here to cover is analytics, and it's usually the piece that ends up being an afterthought, unfortunately. Because right now, most agencies are pretty comfortable making decisions without that underlying data to support it. When it comes to staffing or outreach, it's happening without a lot of visibility, but that is one of the biggest benefits of Salesforce is it's able to bring visibility up and really allow us to, with clean data going in, we can get really valuable reports coming out that actually align to the questions that your agency is trying to answer. So while we can build off of these modular pieces that give us a great jumping off point, Salesforce is really built to align to what your organization needs by way of analytics.
Way to tie a bow on it, Cal. I love that. So, recapping the five core elements: people, culture, process, tech, and analytics. I think you can see as you tell that story as a journey, and it becomes cyclical, just like the logo, that if you start with people, get the culture aligned, get the processes redesigned before you put the tech in, measure, we'll call it lather, rinse, repeat, that we're going to remove this cognitive overload. I talked about how our brains actually work. We want to take people who are demoralized and living in this constant state of struggle, not with a shiny new tool, but something that actually feels like a relief to them, that feels better for them, and not a shiny new cage, as it were, if you're just deploying something that didn't truly take into consideration what you're meant to be doing. And we'll end that always with the question, what will you do with the newfound time when you've actually deployed something that's useful to manage to truly getting my job done and serving my constituency from end to end?
That's a great question. So let's talk about how Salesforce in particular can help agencies get some of that time back so that they can use it more effectively to serve constituents. Salesforce, a lot of people know by name from some of the Matthew McConaughey commercials and Super Bowl performances, but why are we talking about Salesforce as a platform within the government space? Kenny, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it is confusing, huh? Sometimes because of the name. But fair question. Folks will think sales teams, customer pipelines, business development, right? But the reality is Salesforce has spent years and years building capabilities for many different verticals and in general, of course, for state and local government. They didn't hand agencies a completely blank slate and say, hey, you'll figure it out. Just it's Salesforce, but just build stuff on it, you'll figure it out, right? They created actual solutions against the use cases that these agencies do every day. So if you're managing licenses and permits, doing inspections and going out from house to house or business to business, there's actually a solution that has all of that built into it already, right? If your agency runs grant programs, same thing. Solution for a grant lifecycle is built on top of the Salesforce-based platform. And if your teams are managing constituent cases, volunteering events, or even community programs, or in the case of Keep Arkansas Beautiful, actually managing parks and rec and all of that, those capabilities are there. They exist. So the point is that every agency needs every one of those things typically. So you're not starting from scratch. You're starting with the technology that then you can have the dials to then tweak, but it's already designed around your common challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's something else to think about in terms of the 5 core elements. By adopting Salesforce and some of these pre-configured solutions like grants management, volunteer management, you also have the opportunity to rethink your process and leverage best practice that Salesforce has done for you. So instead of building custom software built on your current way of doing things, you're configuring proven capabilities based on industry best practice to fit the way that your agency operates.
So we've got the baseline, and then we've got these big Lego blocks that represent the different parts of Salesforce that we can just plop into place as they're needed. And then the top of the Lego blocks, we've got little things that we can configure and really tailor made to the agency. So that's probably I don't have a good metaphor there. I guess Lego's kind of the metaphor, but I'm sure I'll think of one eventually. But yeah, that right there, having those three things, the baseline, the big modules, the Lego blocks, and then being able to fine tune and tweak it, that's what helps the organizations deliver faster. And again, it lowers the risk of big technology projects. It used to be that technology projects were huge endeavors, huge investments, and were really prone to issues. That's not really a thing as much anymore because of this type of strategy.
Yeah, and because we can do all of this with Salesforce, and because these Lego blocks fit together, we have a more cohesive solution and we eliminate some of the isolation that was happening when your constituents have multiple types of experiences they might have with you, where one day it's a permit and the next day it's an inspection they're scheduling and they want to volunteer for a program. Because we can have all of this in one system together, we have a more connected view for people. And that's where agencies see that improvement start to gain velocity, because it's not just one process getting better, it's not just one piece of that, it's how we can make the whole experience more unified for those folks you work with.
Yeah, and I think that's where AI starts to become more interesting. What are your thoughts there, Cal?
Absolutely. Because of how connected we have taken these agencies and the maturity that they can reach when they move into a system that allows them to unify their data in that way, we can start to layer in AI in a more meaningful capacity. So now that we have information on licensing and cases and grants, we can start to take care of those repetitive tasks that come with them and leave the work to your public servants so that they can be the people, they can be hands-on, they can give meaning to all of that work behind the scenes that it takes for them to do their job.
I want to add one thing here from a five to flow perspective on AI, Teresa, since you brought it up. And as you guys think about the modular Legos, is as we think about efficiency and what people hear, just being real, we have connotations to words. So that's a loaded word. Teresa, your background in change management vocabulary matters. So when we say efficiency, staff here, oh, we're going to do more with less until we do everything with nothing. And so I really want to be mindful as we think about all the layoffs we've seen, different things happening in both public and private sector, is now I've got to do three people's jobs. In fact, somebody kind of broke down crying with me the other day on that topic. And so with different types of public administration, and people are dreaming of triaging and getting to this world of productivity, that our number one focus has to be what is the most important work we're doing. I love this Beautify Arkansas story. It's not what can I do more in Salesforce, it's what can I do in Salesforce that gets me to have that beautification actually happen, executing on the mission and vision of the organization. So with the mission work you guys do so much, or the clients that have mission based work, we want to understand. I'll go back to that question, Teresa, that I posed. What do you do with the new found time you get back from these efficiencies, and how is it more focused on the mission? So I'm working with an organization looking for a cure for diabetes. And so is my time mostly spent sifting through data to find out how much my donors have given, or is it to actually spend more client facing time with those donors, going to more races, going to more events, doing what I actually am strategically done? And so what was I hired for? What can I get done faster? Did you get to leave at 5 instead of 7? Are you taking your vacations? Are you having meals with your family? Are you taking care of your health? Did you take a lunch break? And that's the version for me that whenever I felt like I sold my soul to the corporate devil doing large scale corporate or federal tech transformations, I'm like, training my change management team that you're in a room to show them how to get home faster, to take care of your health, to have a mission-based vision that we can share with all of our clients when we're spending the time to rewrite this process, spending the time to take best practices for these tools and deliver them so that, Theresa, you've got a baby to go see. Cal, you might want to go for a nice afternoon walk. Kenny, you're going to rearrange the furniture in your kitchen. Theresa?
Yeah, I think that brings us back to the whole premise of the episode, which is how do we do more with less and get some of our time back? So let's shift a little bit into our favorite subject, Kate, change
Yeah.
management. Do
Well,
you want to talk? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd love to hear your thoughts since you're in with these agencies so much and how many have skipped change management and what did their success look like and which ones didn't and how that feels to you. So you can share either side of that. If you're skipping the human side, how does that show up?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that change management is part of our delivery methodology here is because we know that skipping change management isn't really change management saved. It's just paid for later with interest.
Mm.
Because when you have staff that don't trust the system or don't know that it's coming, they're not going to use it. And that's where those workarounds that we've been talking about become the new process. And that's where we're seeing the time suck and staff spending a lot of hours working manually or doing what the system that was built to automate, they're not adopting. So our change management framework here at Vectr has three phases that are largely adopting the ProSci methodology. The first is to assess and prepare. We typically use ProSci's impact index assessment to be able to understand more about the culture. And we also like to work with executives or any of the sort of directors in these agencies to do some visioning so that we know where resistance is going to show up before it happens. And then the second phase is really where a lot of the work happens in helping end users shift from current state to future state. And that's where we leverage our champion networks. And we try to incorporate sprint demos and having the champions weigh in. And we also usually leverage a multi-channel communication engagement approach so that rollout isn't a surprise and it's not communicated just through email. And then the last phase is really just making sure that we're reinforcing and sustaining adoption. And that's where after we go live, we emphasize having adoption support, offering ongoing enablement, and making sure that our sponsors are also looking at adoption so that they also can help reinforce expectations and not just treating it like training.
Absolutely, because the SLED specific risk that happens here when change management doesn't happen, we see a bad implementation or a bad rollout, isn't just that they don't adopt it, it's that turnover starts to happen. In these agencies, that institutional knowledge is invaluable and often irreplaceable. So when we see this downstream effect happening for these roles that are already really challenging, we start to see that loss really compound here.
And I want to share one more thing because it was the same client talking about change management at the operations level where she's like, I don't get it. Just I'm building this thing. They need to go use it. And I said, that's not change management. What change management is backing way up and thinking, you know what, before we even choose a tool, create a champion network, do a comms plan, we have to consider nobody sat down and took a class or got comms on using TikTok. It was built knowing how our brains work. What's going to release dopamine? What's going to get me addicted? Instagram. Nobody took Instagram training class. This technology is now especially exacerbated with AI, built in an addictive way. And I was just cracking up and talking to you guys about this before of what if people were like playing in Salesforce as much as we're like addicted to our social media. So a true change management plan starts way over here off camera of preparing, like you said, Theresa, for the change, which includes the tool selection, the process rebuild, and building the tool itself with adoption in mind, almost to an addiction level. So you're not praying it happens after go live. And then that champion network can be contributors early on if they're engaged as focus groups. So it doesn't feel like this happened to me, it happened with and for me. So I was thinking about this when you're deploying field service inspectors, but nobody talked to those field service reps first. These reps get routed to places where they have no business to be. They don't have the skill sets, and they're stuck on the phone talking to their tech center, getting help doing the job. Meanwhile, they have the client bugging them in the room, like, is my thing fixed? Right. And so things that could have been done so much easier with less cognitive load, people can get into flow with it. I think, Cal, you and I joked it's like sending somebody out with a chainsaw when all they needed was a hammer.
Yeah, that's why we need to really focus on finding that intersection of the right tool and the right person at the right place at the right time.
Yep. And when you build a champion network from the start, when the inspector who's been with the agency for years can help shape that and really understand the key pain points, what we're solving, we build that bridge for the whole team, and nothing's imposed. They helped build it. It's like I used to joke, built for the people, with the people, by the people, right?
For sure. And that's, I think, where there's a difference between adoption that might be stuck at 30% versus one that kind of crosses that threshold of 80% or higher.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with you guys, when we went through our Discover Flow class, we saw that difference of if we're building organizational flow principles to help enable peak performance versus it's just going to happen with some of the high performers, we're really able to create a much better environment where all of the 5 core elements are working for them, not against them. And so we don't want anyone to get stuck or go, yeah, that's going to work, and go on luck. So having said all that, I think we need to wrap up. Let's pull it together for each of you one honest, actionable takeaway, because a podcast is a waste if we don't go do something different from today. Cal, how about you?
Yeah, I'll start. I want to point agencies towards figuring out the readiness question they need to ask of, do we actually know where people are losing the most time? Not like, yeah, like how can I maybe take a guess, but really specifically, is it a licensing? Is it a grant application process? Where is it happening? Because if you can't answer it with specifics, your technology decision is premature. Again, if you can't answer the question of where your people are losing time, the technology decision is premature.
That's a good takeaway. I don't know if I can follow up with that, but mine is always fun and boring, but it's technology. So it's the infrastructure, not the intervention itself. So the process, even though I'm all tech, the process has to be right first before we go right into the architecture and into the build. Again, if you start with the platform and not the process, you're going to end up with that expensive chair that is ugly and no one wants to use.
And I would say for me, if you're thinking about budget and where you can save, don't cut the change management line. Your implementation cost is actually the smaller number. Being able to have adoption fail is the cost that will haunt you over the next 3 fiscal years.
Oh, that broke my heart. You guys had some jabs there. So, all right, I'll just close on, we cannot outbuild a broken human foundation. And the most well-configured tool, there's some great shows on this, that people build these amazing tools, but nobody uses them because they're not built with the humans in mind. So I love how you guys are doing this. Kenny, the technology is important. It's one of the 5. It's just not the only thing. So it serves the people, not the other way around. May your automation be helpful and your humans thoughtful and your meetings short.
Amen. So with that, let's sign off. If you're interested in working with our team or learning more, visit vectorsolutions.com and learn more about our state and local capabilities, check out our case studies, and book some time to talk to us. And you can find Kate and the team at 5flow.com to learn more about the organizational wellness diagnostics. Thanks for having all of us today, guys, and thanks for all of your time.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks,
It's so good.
Thanks.